Well, hello, Helen Kramer. Thank you so much for joining us. We are live.
My pleasure,
Today
as
is
always.
absolutely. Well, today is really exciting. It's the kickoff and the first episode of six on tools for living a liberated life. And these are six concepts that me and Helen have discussed a lot over the last couple years or year or two, and they have been the most transformative for me. So I wanted to really dive in and create some time for us to explain what each of these means and how we can incorporate it into our lives. So I'm going to let Helen dive into the first topic, which is on positive intent, and then we can go um, dive into that a little bit more. So, Helen, to you.
So, understanding that all behavior, every thought, every action has a positive tint, even if it has a negative outcome, is vital for making peace with yourself and having good communication with other people. So, when I was studying psychology, I came across somebody named Kurt Goldstein, who I call my philosophical father. And he reacted against Freud and all this pathology and said all living organisms have one drive, and that's for mastery, to be the best they can be. So when I call it positive intent, we're always trying to be the best that we can be. But we have interferences in the way our brains work. We get a lot of misinformation from our culture. So even though we're trying to be the best that we can be, there are these interferences. And an interference is something that is, in a sense, not coming from your core, but is affecting you.
So let's give a few examples of what this may look like, because this was something that really helped me be a lot gentler with myself
Yeah.
in seeing where some of this came from. So yeah, let's give us some examples.
So um, if somebody has an addiction, they're an alcoholic or they're using drugs. If I ask them, what's your positive intent when you're using it? They'll always tell me they want to feel calm, they want to feel peaceful. But if they haven't been given tools to get there and they're anxious and in a way that feels agonizing or they're depressed, they don't know what to do to get to a peaceful place. And people become addicted to a substance or a behavior because when they first start to use, let's say it's alcohol, the first drink or two, I feel calm, all the worrying and every agitation has left me. The problem is that the substance, like alcohol, isn't really made to bring about peace. So it can temporarily stop the agitation or the anxiety, but then it boomerangs. So then you start to drink, you get drunk, you feel out of control, you feel shame the next day, you feel hungover. But the positive intent is always to feel peaceful. So when I work with people, we work out another way to fulfill the positive intent. But it doesn't matter what the behavior is, if you ask the right question, you'll always find that there was something positive that you wanted, but you weren't able to get there. Did that make sense, Ryan?
Yeah, absolutely. And I was thinking before the call, an area that this helped me, and one of them for me was that I was always so hard on myself with how I looked, how I was dressing, and being really critical, having a critical self-talk, if you will. And through our work, it made me just realize and uncover that for me, that was really just wanting to feel accepted and loved. And so now it's like it's just changed my perspective that I'm not needing to be so harsh on myself. All that was is me just wanting to feel like I was part of it and that people were gonna see me and, and accept me and love me. And so that was just years of staring in the mirror, never feeling fully satisfied with what I was seeing. And there was a lot to uncover in that, but I think understanding that we do all have a positive intent and using your words that we're not maliciously doing something um, is really helpful. So I guess the second part of that is how do you uncover what your positive intent is
Okay, so
when you're
Yeah. And I just want to backtrack a little bit because I don't believe anybody wants to suffer. I don't believe in masochism. Again,
Masochism.
so that if something isn't working, it's because we haven't learned the right way to actualize our positive intent. So I call my model non-judgmental and not pathological. You're not sick and you're not self-sabotaging. So I move away from all that critical language and the kind of language where somebody will say, oh, look at so and so, they're their own worst enemy. No, they're not. They want to feel good, they just haven't learned how to. And when we start judging people, we lose our humanity and we lose their humanity in that process. So I was wondering if we could follow through with your example about criticizing the way you looked. Is
Hmm.
that okay? Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
So again, in order to uncover the positive intent, I would even take it further. Like you said, you want to look a certain way so people would like you, that you'd be loved and accepted. Now, the next step, even to take it deeper, is to sort of like I would ask somebody, close your eyes and imagine that you got all the love and acceptance that you were looking for. And then what would you feel?
Just peace and love and joyous.
Yes. And and unfortunately, that's everybody's birthright. If you've ever seen a little baby
Mm.
or you have an image of babies, every baby deserves to be loved unconditionally so they can stay in that peace. They can stay in that loving feeling. Unfortunately, our parents didn't get that unconditional love, so they don't know how to give it to us. So instead of staying in love, we have two states of being. We can either be in the heart area, which is loving, or we can be in the fear part of the brain, which is vigilant. And I think by your behavior, there was a vigilance. What can I do to avoid rejection? What can I do to make people like
Mm.
me? So because you didn't grow up with that peaceful feeling that you were born with. So in order to shift behavior, one of the things that I intuited, which has been proven by neuroscience, in order to change behavior, we have to replace what we're doing with something that works better. So if you look at what the amount of stress and anxiety you had in trying to fix the way you looked so that you could get people to like you, um, if you learn how to feel good the way you were meant to feel at birth, then you don't need to go to the old behavior, which for a moment can make you feel good if somebody looks at you when they're approving or whatever. But then
Hmm.
that evaporates and you're back looking in the mirror and trying to dress right. So
Right.
so when I asked you like what would happen if people always approved of you and you felt that peace, the way to change brain patterns and rewire the brain is to keep practicing that feeling of peace. The more you
Hmm.
internalize that feeling of peace, the less you have the agitation, the less you're looking outside to get something that's already in you. Then not only do you have the sense of peace that's with you all the time, it's with you when you're working, it's with you when you're alone, it's with you in business situations and social situations. But then when you're really with people, then you can just play and have fun because you're not going there trying to get a fundamental need met that they no amount of approval really can give you.
Absolutely. And it's kind of looking externally for something that is an internal actual reality.
Yeah, and the way that we look at it in the work that I do and the healing work that we do is we're just sweeping away everything that's covering that loving, beautiful heart that we have. So it's always there, but sometimes it's so obscured by all the negative self talk and all the vigilance looking for rejection and feeling abandoned and all that intensity that's just a recreation of childhood pain and trauma and it isn't even
Mm.
happening now. So
Right.
So
Yeah, I
this,
want to go and you gave an example a while back on a woman that you saw in the subway because I think that had some judgmental wrapped up in it and
right. Yeah.
also the positive intent.
The,
So I resonated with that one because I think there is a lot of judgment. So if would you give us that one?
Yeah, I remember years ago, I really was making an effort not to be judgmental, not because I wanted to be a nice person, but because I didn't like how it felt inside. It's coming from distress, and no matter how much you judge somebody else, when that moment you're better, and then the next moment you're waiting for somebody to judge you, and then you. I always say
Mm,
when you exercise the judgmental muscle, you're going to turn it on yourself, and then you're going to be paranoid because you're doing it, you're imagining everybody else is doing it, and even if they are, who cares? If you're not judging yourself, it doesn't matter if other people are stuck in judgment. So I was riding on the subway, and across from my seat there was a woman, and she was wearing, in my taste, very garish makeup and very garish clothes, and I felt that instant of, you know, just about to make a judgment, and I said, okay, peel what I call peel the onion, okay, to find her positive intent. So I said, okay, that woman got up in the morning and she wanted to look good. When I get up in the morning and I put my makeup on and I get dressed, I want to look good. And so the more I could feel that common humanity. So what she put on, makeup and clothes, that's what looked good to her eye. What I wear looks good to
hmm
my eye. There's no universal uh, parameters for those things. But the minute you do that, it's like, oh, we're all the same. We're all the same. All
mm,
this, I'm better and you're worse. And given what's happening in our country now, um, judging somebody's appearance, and then you just go on the continuum, that's judging their looks, they're judging their race, judging this, judging that. And before you know it, you're in the realm of white supremacists. That's where judgment goes.
mm.
And
Wow, to that extreme.
it's a continuum. So if
Hmm
I'm judging somebody because of their sexual orientation or their looks or their weight, that is the same behavior at a less extreme, but it's, I find, feel that it's like a kind of pollution. We pollute the energy in the world with all this negative judgment instead of opening up our hearts. And again, when I could feel that this woman and I were the same at the core, it was just, not only did I feel sort of loving and open, but it also makes you feel at peace in the world because everybody's the same underneath. There are no enemies.
Everybody is has
There is no other.
right, and so many of us have the same right, and there's so much similarities with all of our positive intents
Right.
for our each of our own lives. Um, yeah, and I think it really takes, especially as I've been going through the day, an awareness of the thoughts I'm thinking, the words I'm using, and I know a lot of times you'll not correct me, but I'll say a word, and you're like, well, let's dive into what that word means. But it's really being present of like where what you're thinking, where you're going with that, is
And if there's
starting to
any,
unpack what some of the positive intent you may have.
and a lot of the words we use are subtly judgmental, but we're so used to using those words that we don't really feel the judgment. And sometimes I'll say to somebody, um, looking at their self-talk, if you had a child that you loved very much, would use those same words with the child and say, no, 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 I wouldn't talk that way. But we say it to ourselves. And every time
Mm-hmm.
we use negative self-talk, we're actually sending a danger signal to all the cells in our body that we're being attacked. And we may
Mm.
be very used to doing it, but that doesn't mean that it's benign. So, and in terms of our relationships, so it's very relieving when you say, "Oh, yeah, my positive intent was to get people to like me. Like I was a helper and a caretaker. I didn't realize when I was helping and caretaking that I was trying to make people like me. And every time you do that, you're actually sending yourself a signal that you're not likable unless you do this. But the core of you isn't
Mhm.
likable. Now, the interesting thing is that I don't think I do anything differently than I used to do. It's just coming from a different energy. It's just coming from the joy of being able to share some of these tools with people, but there's no contamination like I have to feel better, which the other person picks up anyway. That it's not only about them; it's about you. So it's a contamination. So when we can get to this place, like when you imagined everybody liked you and you got to the place of peace, that's what we're working towards all the time. And
Hmm.
we need to know that's what everybody else is working towards. So just like I looked at that woman and said she was trying to get to look good in what she chose to wear, other people are trying to feel good by behaviors that may be very different from ours, but the core intent is the same. So
Hmm.
there,
Yeah. So can we dive in? I know this episode is all around positive intent. So I want to make sure that people are really clear, because I know we talked about substances, and we've had that conversation as well, as that intent is just really to feel good. And so that's on that one. And we've talked about a couple others. Are there a few more examples that you can give that you find very common, where this comes into play?
well, I think that the sort of self-critical talk, like I'm lazy, I'm not doing enough, I'm stupid, and every time I ask somebody why they do that, they'll say, I want to motivate myself. And again, motivate yourself to what? Well, be more successful. Then what would you get to feel if you were more successful? Well, then I'd be able to go, I can just relax. So, but
Hmm.
but I'm glad you asked this question, because we have a very upside down view of human nature, which is that when I talk about positive intent, most people think that if they didn't push themselves so hard, they'd be lazy, they'd never be motivated. That's not who we are. And it reminds me of working with some people that were raised in very repressive religious homes, where everything was that could be a sin. You'll go to hell for that, you'll go to hell for that. Well, most people are not raised in that environment, but our culture has a similar analogous prejudice and misinterpretation, that if we're not on the case, we're not beating ourselves up, if we're not pushing to be productive, that we just be lazy sloths. Just go watch little children. You can see their mastery. They want to learn how to, they want to tie their shoe themselves. When I was playing with a little 5-year-old that I love, and we were going on a bunk bed, and I said, "Do you want me to help you go up the ladder?" And she looks at me, "No, Aunt Helen, I got this." And everything we were talking about, I got this, because it feels good to learn and to do.
Hmm.
And we've lost that connection to ourselves. It feels good when you do a good job, or when you're creative, even in any business situation. It doesn't have to be the arts. It feels good. That's our nature. So we have to stop looking at ourselves as lazy, sloth-like creatures, because we're not.
Yeah, I even from our talk today, the awareness or recognition that so much of our self-talk, or that affects so many different areas of our lives, really our positive intent is just to feel good, to feel ease and peace and love and joy and liberation. And I think that that's such a beautiful thing. And again, it's kind of circling back to where one of the first things you said, that's that by practicing being in this state is one of the fundamental parts of how we
Right.
manifest the change.
And I wanted to add one other thing, because I know so many people want to feel better, and they're doing yoga and they're doing meditation. All those things are beautiful. But if you're using negative self talk all day long, you're undoing whatever piece you got from the yoga, whatever piece you got from the meditation. So I look at, we all need a mosaic of things that make us feel good, but the self talk is a big part of it.
Yeah, and we can practice throughout the day. I at times myself, I would get caught into, all right, I'm on a downward spiral, or I'm feeling this way. How do I fix it in that moment, or what do I do in that moment? But I've learned through our work that the key for me has been to practice feeling the joyful state
That's right.
throughout the day, all the time, because you train it, just like you practice and train for your SAT exams or whatever, you're
Right.
going to learn. If you practice the state of this current state that you want to be in throughout the day, you really do train yourself for that.
Right. And all we can create all the neurotransmitters that medications give us without any side effects. So when you're going into that peaceful state, you're producing serotonin. When you're feeling joyful, you're producing dopamine. You're producing endorphins. So we can do that through the day, and then we don't need medications. And while we're producing those feel-good chemicals, we're creating new neurotransmitters for those chemicals to travel on, and simultaneously we're dissolving the feel bad chemicals and the feel bad neural pathways.
So we're making our own antidepressants.
We're making, yeah, we're making our own feel good chemicals that were there to begin with, and we
Yeah,
just didn't learn how to maximize it.
right. And I love that you use that word, that it's our birthright. It's like,
It
that's
is,
so empowering.
yeah.
And
Well,
that's how kids are. Yeah.
yeah, they're just bundles of love and joy.
And I think another important concept that I've had to also, and you mentioned this also right after you said our birthright, is that our parents weren't taught how to love unconditionally. And we weren't shown that. And it's not that it wasn't intentional on their part, they just weren't
No.
also given it themselves to realize and see what that state of being is like.
Right. And so many of the things that they did that were hurtful was because they had a positive intent. If they were hard on us, it was, I want you to be successful, or they
Mm.
criticized our looks is because I want you to get the acceptance that I never had.
Mm.
So, but if we don't, again, if we don't know what unconditional love is, and the peace and joy that we have with it, we don't know how to teach it to our children.
Hmm.
But
Yeah,
it's not because we want to hurt them.
right. And I think that's kind of the basis of positive intent, is that we're not doing things out of harm. There
No.
is an underlying positive intent, even if the way that it manifests is not a
Right.
positive
And,
aspect
and
of our life.
and I think people will see as we develop the six series thing, as a 6-part series, it's to show all the things that get in our way that have nothing to do with us, that have nothing to do with
Mm.
us being failures or being blameworthy. Just things that got in the way that we didn't know were in the way. We kept struggling and struggling to do better, but we didn't know how to replace the things that were on our way. And then we feel this sense of personal failure when just look around, everybody's struggling.
Right. Absolutely. Well, that's, I think, why we both connected on wanting to do what we can to provide some of these tools. So I think that's great. This has been a lovely talk. Is there anything else you want to add for this episode on positive intent?
No, just to say to people that the more you live in that, and I hope the other talks that we do will show people that you don't have to suffer. You can live more liberated and more joyfully.
Mm. And you're the foundation. You individually, when you create that state, it feels like that so can be transformative, yourself, and then how that helps to put that out there in the world as well.
Yeah, because
It's the
again,
beginning.
when we're doing the judgment, we all worry about pollution, plastic bottles and whatever. Our energy can either pollute or can enhance the environment. We all pick up each other's energy. So let's send
Mm.
out the good
All right.
stuff. We need it.
Let's send out the
Let's
good
embrace
stuff,
each other with all this good.
especially now. Yes.
We've always
I
needed
think
it,
this
but
is a beautiful
now there's
place
an
to end it.
opening up for it.
Yes. Much more so, it feels like, than any other time.
Yeah, and
So
I mean, every
excellent.
time.
Well, thank you.
Okay, so we'll see everybody next
Absolutely. Well,
Tuesday.
thank you so much, Helen. I appreciate it.
Okay.
Yes, sounds good. Thank you, everyone, for watching. We'll see you next week.
Okay, take care.
Thank you.